to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight are our old and dear friends, Bandun Nair and Clayton Jones.
Good evening.
So we'll be discussing several things tonight and hoping that everyone calls in to join into the discussion. Before we start, I would like to say something on a personal level. Over the past 2 or 3 weeks, there have been a half a dozen or so people that I didn't know that have come up to me in restaurants or coffee shops or bookstores and said they had seen the show and how much they appreciated what we were doing. Now, we do this show for those of you out there. We're not like commercial television where the minute the cameras are turned off, we have instant ratings from all of the polling services. So the only way we know if we're doing any good is for you to tell us about it. So it really pleases me when someone comes up and says, "Hi, we've seen the show, we like it," and sometimes they give me real good ideas too. So don't be bashful if you want to talk to us about the show. I know I'm really always glad to take time, and I assume that
it's always a wonderful feeling when it kind of
and the other thing is, our only other real feedback from you are the phone calls during the show, and they really do help keep us focused and on track and being aware of what you're interested in. Other than that, I just had one little bit of news tonight that I think is pretty exciting. This month, Vermont became the second state to approve the commercial cultivation of hemp as a matter of state law. Of course, that still leaves the feds blocking them. But I've really been wondering, especially with the kind of energy crunch we're in now, and with the potential for hemp, why the hempsters among us have been so quiet lately. It seems to me this is the time to speak up for hemp.
Mm-hmm. It is, because hemp is something on the horizon. It can help replace petroleum. It's good for medicine. It's good for food. It can make biodiesel. There's so much good about hemp. I think our government is going to have to capitulate their position on this.
Well, ironically, since the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, the government has only blinked once and retreated from its hard-nosed war on drugs. And that was in 1942, when we could no longer get fiber products from the Philippine Islands, and they authorized the growing of hemp to provide rope for the Navy. So hemp's there.
Yeah, it's there, and it's here too, but unfortunately, because it hasn't been allowed to grow commercially in the U.S., it's a huge import that we're missing out on, basically. Yeah. And you can get hemp waffles, hemp clothes, hemp paper, everything. It's a huge industry, and we're missing out on that.
Announcement of hemp milk as a substitute, like the soy milks and the rice milks for those that are lactose intolerant. But let's don't reveal too much of what will probably be my next column in the normal newsletter. What else is new around the world this week?
Well, I've got a little more information on, I guess, Barney Frank's bill.
Okay.
And it's H.R. 5843, and I believe he's trying to get Ron Paul to co-sponsor it if he hasn't already. It's called the Act to Remove Federal Penalties for Personal Use of Marijuana by Responsible Adults. It's the first federal decrim bill in 24 years, and basically would end penalties for adults who are possessing up to 100 grams or 3.5 ounces. And we've always been talking about how many people actually live in the 12 medical marijuana states. The population combined of those just in the 12 medical marijuana states accounts for over 100 million people in the U.S.
Which is
right
over
now.
a third of the population.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Not only that, but most polls, and even this article particularly cited a CNN Time poll that we saw on the cover of Time years ago. They had a huge thing on medical marijuana, but 3/4 of Americans favor decriminalization. And, this is a fantastic bill. It needs more support and everything. But I'm going to take a more optimistic approach.
Okay.
And with our future upcoming president, this shouldn't be even a problem.
Well, along the same line, what do you think of the hearing Senator Webb has announced in his senatorial committee of dealing with some of the problems of the drug war and the problems of illegality?
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, I haven't.
It was announced a week or so ago. Hasn't been much made of it, but Webb seems to be one of the comers in the Senate these days. So.
Yeah, is that Jim Webb of Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah, he was looked at as he may have been or may still be one of the vice presidential candidates for Obama.
He's under consideration, strong consideration. For
right.
Him, yeah.
So that would be excellent. Yeah. And what committee is that?
Some sort of Senate Security Committee. I don't remember exactly. Okay. Maybe some listener can bring us more up to date on that.
Google that and call in.
What else do you have this week?
Well, let's see. Representative Earl Jones of North Carolina. Has anyone heard of that guy? This is the first time. Yeah, the first time I'm hearing about their interest in medical marijuana. And in fact, they want to fund a study to study the effects of and potentially legalize medical marijuana in North Carolina. And it sounds like this has been a perennial bill, but this was, I guess, in the last couple of weeks that it came up again. But same thing happened like in Texas. The House leadership is refusing to have the bill heard. Jocelyn Elders has testified against it, former Surgeon General in Clinton's administration.
We need to make our politicians more accountable. Just like our governor says that he will never sign a bill for medical marijuana in this state. And that's just personal prejudices. He is right. Not being the governor of the people. He's being his own person, and he's following his own path. It's not the path of the people.
Well, one of the things I think 10 years ago, I think most of these politicians strongly believed what they're saying. More and more of what I'm hearing is that many more politicians are willing to admit in private that the drug laws are a joke and something needs to be done. But they're still afraid that if they take a public position on them, it will cost them so many votes they can't get elected. It's quit being a matter of principle with a lot of them, and it's simply
survival.
I can't afford the exposure. My future depends on getting reelected.
Well, the thing is, we have these shows here, and we read enough news about it. Every so often you'll see a little editorial on it, this, that, and the other. This week, Lou Dobbs has done at least 2 shows that have had a huge segment on border attacks, war on drugs, and how it's affecting our borders and everything. It's coming to light, and eventually, hopefully, with the support and opinion of our hopefully future president, they'll be able to come to light and be like, yes, it's not just a personal preference, but as my opposition, or a seemingly personal opposition, but this is affecting my constituents in more ways than just a moral obligation.
Well, the sad thing for me is that we've been seeing all of this publicity about the Mexican drug wars. We have even heard a lot of editorials and news stories attributing these wars to the traffic of drugs into America. The sad thing is, I have not seen a single story by a single reporter anywhere in this country that's analyzed the fact that it's the money generated by drug prohibition that fuels the war. It's not the drugs. And this is something I think it's hard for people to understand. Drug dealers don't give a damn about drugs. They don't care about drugs.
They want the money.
What they care about is money.
Mm-hmm.
And if we reduce the price of drugs to their natural commodity prices by legalizing them, just like we did with alcohol in 1933,
Right.
the money would dry up. The drug dealers would have to look for something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
The Mexican drug wars are not caused particularly by the Mexican bandits loving to have shootout wars with the Mexican government. They're caused because these people are fighting over the somewhat more than $20 billion a year our drug laws shove down their throats.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. In fact, one of the news segments was on the Catholic Church is now becoming involved in the drug wars.
Oh, really?
In that all these drug cartels are profiting so much that some of them in Mexico are actually contributing to the building of churches and the building of small chapels and things like that. But it's essentially dirty money.
Nothing new again.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the great
The Catholics.
church edifices of the Renaissance, they were basically conscience money to pay off for bad deeds of the men giving to it.
All right.
And let's face it.
There's very little good money out there.
Well, you know,
Wow.
it's always been my opinion on this that taking money from a bandit and turning it into a research lab on a university campus with his mother's name on it is one of the best ways in the world to change bad money into good money.
Mm-hmm.
And the church has been doing this for hundreds of years. So, very rarely does anyone look to see how many blood stains are on a dollar bill that's offered to them.
Well, look, just like there's more people dying from legal drugs than illegal drugs.
Yeah.
I believe it's some 7,000 people a year from aspirin and Tylenol, which is 3 times more than are killed from illegal drugs.
Well, it's always tickled me to look at, and my favorite example is Vicodin, and there are several others, Percodan and a few others, where they have taken hydrocodone, a fairly harmless opioid. I mean, yeah, if you take enough of it, it can kill you. But other than that, it has practically no effects. And to make it legal to sell by prescription, they add acetaminophen, the active ingredient of Tylenol, to it. And Tylenol is practically guaranteed to cause permanent liver damage. So they made the drug legal by making it more deadly.
Mm-hmm. And we're at the bottom of this pylon. I mean, all these drug companies run wild with what they're doing. They have the DEA as their enforcement arm. And they tell us that things like MDMA or a little bit of mushrooms or marijuana is a terrible thing.
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing the past year or two has been that one of the older myths of the drug war is turning around and biting the government on the neck. Since the heroin acts of the middle 1920s, and particularly with the Marijuana Tax Act of 37, the government has based its whole approach onto the theory that there are some drugs that are bad and some drugs that are good. Heroin's a bad drug, therefore it's illegal. Morphine's a good drug, therefore doctors can use it. What we have been seeing in the past few years, and it's been kind of embarrassing, I think, to the DEA, is that people don't bother to go break the law and get bad illegal heroin. They instead get the same effect with abusive use of nice, safe, legal Vicodin or oxycodone.
That study came out, something like 7 out of 10 adults are on some type of prescription drug that has some kind of deleterious effects like that. What makes a difference between a good and a bad drug?
I was reading today, I think it was right in here, that they were saying that approximately 70 million adult Americans have problems with prescription drugs.
Okay, let's take a break and then we'll come back and talk more about prescription drugs.
I'm Marcia Rosenbaum, and I direct the San Francisco office of the Drug Policy Alliance. Now, I want to ask you young people a question. Have your parents had the drug talk with you? If they have, I hope it's been productive. If not, I would suggest that you open up the drug talk with them. It's a very, very important talk. And we at the Drug Policy Alliance, through the Safety First Project, have materials that can help you open up the drug talk with your parents. And particularly a brand new booklet called Safety First, a reality-based approach to teens and drugs. Now, in this booklet, your parents will get lots of advice from a reality-oriented parent, me, about how to talk to you about drugs. Basically, there's 3 key issues. One is communication. You want to keep this drug talk going for as long as you can. Probably for as long as you have a relationship with your parents. It never ends. There's always issues. So communication. Next is honesty. We've got to be honest with each other. You need to be honest with your parents, and they need to be honest with you. The scare tactics about drug use haven't worked. They're counterproductive, and they don't help us to really educate each other. And then, finally, and maybe most important, is you want to have a solid relationship that is based on values that hold safety as ultimately the most important element of your drug talk. Safety is really the bottom line when it comes to how we should handle the issue of alcohol and other drugs. So I urge you, open up the drug talk. If you're a young person, open it up with your parents. If you're a parent, open it up with your kids. Go to www.Safety First, and you'll find lots and lots of resources there. And good luck. Thank you.
We're back. I'd like to encourage you to call in and join in our conversation with questions or comments, either one. The number's up on the screen. Clayton, you've been looking at some numbers from that recent Florida report on drug deaths.
Well, in Florida, during a 1-year period, talking about illegal and legal drugs. Let me see.
And this is just one state's mortality rates.
This is one state. Yeah. This is the state of Florida.
Shall we take a caller first?
Okay.
Sure.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I have 2 quick questions.
Okay.
My first question is, usually marijuana farmers can crossbreed or bring forth a specific type of hybrid. And I was just wondering, when marijuana grows wild, what is the type of potency you get from wild marijuana?
Okay.
And my second question was the ads that usually come on TV throughout the day for like Viagra and other functions like that. What's the type of percentage that the government makes on the taxes from those drugs?
Okay, those are good questions. Clayton, you've been to university in California lately. You want to talk to us about potency in marijuana?
Potency of marijuana. Potency of marijuana has basically been the same forever. The hybrids take certain cannabinoids that one breed will have, and it is very effective on helping people to eat, and they can breed it with another plant. And 14% is about high average.
Yeah.
It's you're probably closer to 7 to 9% what we see around here.
Well, I know some studies I've seen indicate that the market preference across the United States has typically run about 6% THC, and that in Europe, where they still have the older habit of mixing it in with tobacco and smoking a mixed cigarette, they prefer stronger stuff. But I'm not sure what you can say what the natural plant would be, because the plant grows in all sorts of variations, but probably the old original was about 3.5 to 4%, and it was when they really first started cracking down on the growers in California in the 1970s that they started crossbreeding for some of the stronger strains, simply because that would let them sell smaller bundles and not run as much risk. Yeah.
That's the advantage of stronger marijuana. It takes less to do the same.
Yeah.
Instead of smoking a whole joint or a half a joint, you can hit one or two, have it once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing all of this hysteria about marijuana getting stronger, and but the interesting thing about the way most marijuana is used, with it being smoked or inhaled, the user almost immediately feels the effect, knows how high he is, and stops. And on the other thing we need to look at, we've been using alcohol for thousands of years. And if you go to any bar in this country, there'll be beers at about 6% alcohol, wines that are around 12 to 20% of alcohol, hard liquors that start at about 40% and go up to 75%. And users don't have much problem telling the strong stuff from the weak stuff. You mix highballs out of rum to cut it down to the strength of beer, or you might drink 3 or 4 beers and only one cocktail. So, you know, the fact that some marijuana is stronger than the other, I don't really think much makes any difference at all. Some people have been saying, yeah, the stronger stuff, since you have to smoke less, exposes you to the fewer of the tars and other chemicals in it. Yeah.
Now they're saying that CBDs are preventing and killing cancerous cells in our lungs.
And also, the long-term studies show absolutely no difference in lung cancer occurrences or emphysema or other diseases between long-term marijuana users and non-smokers.
Yeah, and exactly. In fact, when you're smoking tobacco, you're smoking several cigarettes in a day, up to a pack a day, 2 packs a day. Yeah. But with a joint, you know, or if you vaporize...
Some heavy smokers smoke several
a day.
You
can't smoke 20 joints in a day, though. That's a pack of cigarettes. But,
I don't know about that.
Is that a challenge? Let's take a caller before we incriminate ourselves too much. Hi, caller. Do you have a question or a comment for us?
Yeah, talking about prescription drugs, do you all know the modern tobacco rules and regulations internationally be it taxes or just, average cost? I mean, I just got back from Canada, and they have some pretty strong warnings, backed by Hamilton or Grant with change, depending upon the exchange. And, I have no idea. What about Mexico?
Well, that's an interesting question. Thanks, caller. Just from some of my anecdotal evidence and some of my travels in England, I know that they have the same tax rate as possibly New York. It was about $10 for a pack. And in Brazil, interestingly enough, with the Surgeon General's warning, instead of just having a text note, they actually have pictures of black lungs or babies that are born underweight and things like that. But as far as actual taxation, I'm not sure, maybe higher in other countries, lower in others.
There's still a lot of international variation. For instance, China probably until 4 or 5 years ago looked very much like the United States did in the 1940s, with over half the adults regularly smoking tobacco. They have only just recently begun some programs to cut down. I believe India still has an extremely high number of smokers and doesn't have much to do about it. So it varies. Most of Europe has, until recently, was very relaxed about allowing smoking. They've recently started cutting down on public smoking, but the tax question is something else again, because that starts getting into prohibition and black markets. And this is that when taxes get high enough, it pays people to smuggle and to avoid paying them. For instance, recently in Britain, where you were talking about, where the tax is high enough so that the price of a package is up to around $10. One set of recent figures indicated that over 60% of the cigarettes sold in England were smuggled in from Portugal simply to avoid the tax. In New York, where cigarette taxes have been prohibitive, the $8 pack, for 40 or 50 years at least, smuggling from North Carolina into New York has been a career trade, and the mafia is strong into it. A couple of other states that recently really raised their cigarette taxes started seeing more smuggling. We have another caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, can you explain the difference to me between marijuana and hashish? And can you explain to me also what you are smoking when you smoke an opium tie stick and the potency of that?
Okay.
Hash is basically nothing more than the trichomes taken off of the plant matter. And the way you make hash is you take them and you press them together. Potency is basically the same. It smolders, so you're not getting a large amount of it at one time.
Usually there's a three-part distinction made, and this is what the federal law follows. Generally speaking, marijuana is the whole flower bud from a cannabis plant, and some people leave a few leaves in it, but primarily it's the flower bud. If you take either the buds or the buds and leaves, press them and strain them so that you get the oils and resins out of them, that resultant product is called hashish. And it by itself, since it contains only the resins and you're throwing away most of the plant, a very small bit of hashish is equal to a fairly large amount of marijuana. You can then take that hashish, purify it further, remove all of the plant material from it so that you're left only with the oils and resins, and you get something called hashish oil, which is even stronger and more potent.
Interesting story about hashish when it was first collected in places like India and Nepal, because it is so sticky and it's that resinous sap type product. the easiest way for workers to collect it when it was ripe and at that point was to just take off their clothes and run through the fields, and it would stick to their skin. So you would have hash that way. What an excellent job.
Also an early way to collect opium. The other guy's question was about tie sticks.
Something with opiate on it? Or?
He said opium tie sticks.
Potency of opiate tie sticks? I think he's just referring to opiates.
A completely separate drug, but tie sticks referred to some very potent strains of marijuana that were being imported from Southeast Asia, Thailand, during the Vietnamese War as soldiers were going back and forth. And tie sticks became the slang term for one of the more popular, more potent versions of marijuana, smoking marijuana in California during the 70s. But you don't hear the term much anymore.
Not anymore at all.
Yeah. So,
good questions all around.
I think the other question we were asked was, what about the government and taxation from prescription drugs?
There is no taxation. Sales tax.
Yeah.
But
sales tax,
the manufacturer has to pay property tax on all his equipment.
And his federal income tax, but I think it's still a fairly major consideration. They tell me it's time for another break. Okay, so we'll see you in a minute.
Sometimes when we have a problem, we only use one tool. It works pretty good most of the time, so we keep on using it. Pretty soon, when your only tool is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. With prisons overflowing with nonviolent drug offenders, it's time to try some new tools. Drug prohibitionists beat the drum for more jail time, but that has been a self-defeating policy. If someone has a problem with drugs, they need medical help, not incarceration. The drug war is doing more harm than good, and it's time for a change. By reducing the consequences of prohibition, we can deal with the real issues involved in a rational drug policy. There are better tools. If you would like to help reduce the harm caused by the drug war, please visit our website at dpft.org.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
Well, we're back, and we have with us on the phone our good friend Dean Becker from the Drug Truth Network. How are you tonight, Dean?
I'm good, Buford. Unable to tune in tonight. I'm away from the cable, but I wanted to talk to your audience a bit about what I've done in the last week with my Drug Network programs. This Tuesday, we had former Texas warden Rich Watkins. He's also a current member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. But we talked about the situation, how it's developed, and by his percentage, he thinks about 85% of those people who were in his prison were in there either for drug charges or for a lifestyle, if you will, that revolved around the drug war itself. We also featured an interview I did with Mr. Eugene Fields. He's a reporter for the Orange County Register out there in California, and he had done a story about a gentleman, a quadriplegic, who was growing marijuana under Prop 215 via the state of California regulations, and yet they And by they, I mean the county officials busted him for growing marijuana. His case is still ongoing. We talked about the fact that it's local interpretation of the law in California that makes the difference. Had he been in San Francisco, they never would have touched him. Also on the Cultural Baggage Show this week, we had Nurse Mary Lynn Mathry. She's the co-director of a group called Patients Out of Time. And what they have done over the years is monitor the health of the patients that are provided with medical marijuana by the U.S. government, approved by the FDA, security provided by the DEA. And we talked about those conditions, how they have lived longer than had been expected, and that it was due, in fact, to their use of medical marijuana. We also featured a report from Terry Nelson on the Cultural Baggage Show. He's a gentleman now with 33 years experience working for the U.S. government as a custom, border, and air interdiction officer, and who just returned from a one-year stint in Iraq, helping them with their border security. And he, again, is a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I want to advise folks that we own the moral high ground. There is not one person on the planet willing to defend this policy of drug war, certainly not in the to support it in 100% and what it has done to our community. And I want to add a side note. This past week I talked to a group of Lions organization out in E-Town. And this was a group of people about 50 to age 85. And about 8 minutes into the discussion, I kind of saw puzzled looks on their faces, and I asked, is there anyone here who thinks the drug war has merit, that it has, that it's able to hold one drop of legitimacy? And no one raised their hands. They all said, no, it's not working, but our only consideration or wonder is how you're going to end this. It's been together for 90 years. How are you going to break this thing? And I think that's really the question that all of us need to address. How are we going to end this? And with that, I'd like to recommend folks tune into my radio shows. They're available on KPFT here in Houston. That's 90.1 FM, 89.5 FM in Galveston. The Century of Lies show airs on Tuesdays at 11:30 till noon. The Cultural Baggage show on Wednesdays from 11:30 till noon. And most afternoons at 4:20 p.m. you can hear the 420 Drug War News. Buford, I appreciate this chance to talk with your viewers.
Thank you, Dean, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I want to divert us because of something Dean said. When he mentioned the discretionary choices of local law enforcement, there was an interesting story that came across the internet this week about the district attorney in Collins County, Texas, which is one of the suburbs of Dallas. Now, this district attorney has decided on his own that from now on, those people arrested for simple possession of drugs at the misdemeanor level, in other words, up to 2 ounces of marijuana, if they have a totally clean record, if there is no violence or weapons or anything else associated with the charges, that he will agree to give them deferred adjudication for a year with no supervision if they pay a $500 administrative fee, and at the end of that year all the charges will be dismissed. Now, this is a district attorney in Texas that on his own authority more or less has decriminalized marijuana. That's the kind of power local officials have. We have a contested district attorney's election here in Houston this year. We have a contested sheriff's election for the first time in 17 years. These are the places where changes can be made quickly. We have another caller already.
Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. Did you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering what the laws are like on like inhalants that you buy, like gasoline, airplane glue, that kind of stuff.
Oh, inhalants. All right, thanks. You have to be, inhalants. You have to be at least 18.
Inhalants are basically a drug of abuse that was invented by the press. Some reporter wrote a story about it in Colorado in the 60s, and it started spreading. They've imposed some regulations. It's hard, for instance, to buy certain kinds of marking pens, airplane glue, rubber glue's hard. But basically, there can't be very many laws against them because I buy gasoline once a week for my car. I have been known to use paint thinner when I'm painting. So these aren't things that can really be controlled as drugs.
Exactly. We've got another caller. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yes.
Yes, you're on the air.
It's basically, why is it, I saw this on the news the other day, with that Colombian drug lords, why are they being sent to American prisons? And my second question is, what is cocaine made from? Like, what kind of bean or what kind of plant?
Great. Thanks for the questions.
There have been some Colombian drug lords that have been extradited from Colombia to the United States recently, where they're facing 20-year to life imprisonment sentences. My own cynical view of it is that these guys agree to come because it's the safest, softest retirement they can get. But life in American federal prisons, while not easy, is certainly not like life in a Colombian prison. And when they're in prison here, they're not being hunted down and shot by the other cartels. Now, I may be being too cynical about this, but
I can't see that why anybody would want to come to this country and go to jail, period. I think our laws have been changed in the recent years so that we can reach out and go into these other countries because they're sending their illegal products here to this country.
Right, that's what I was wondering. Is this their choice, or are they being extradited?
They're being extradited, but it's under laws where the extradition really can't be enforced to any great extent. Most of them are coming at least partially voluntarily.
Okay, but they're being tried in Colombia.
Most of them are being tried in Colombia. Frequently, they'll plead guilty to come to the American jails. The other question was, where does cocaine come from? There is a plant that is called coca. It grows in primarily high elevations and warm climates. We see it mostly in the Andes in Colombia, Peru, Bolivia. But it previously has also been grown in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Hawaii, for instance. The leaves of this plant contain a substance called coca. Coca has been used as a stimulant by the natives in the region for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
And still to this day.
Yes, still today. It's served as coca tea, among other things. It was an active ingredient as a stimulant in Coca-Cola. That's where it got its name, in fact, until 1903. And this coca, which is about 1% by weight of the leaves of the coca plant, is removed from the coca plant and purified to become cocaine. And that's all cocaine is the purified alkaline from the leaf of the coca plant.
But yeah, and the leaf is actually so dilute that it takes something like 200, give or take, pounds of coca leaves to make one, give or take, pound of coca.
As I say, it amounts to about 1% by weight of the leaf. But it's, all three of the leading scary drugs are pretty simple plant derivatives. I mean, marijuana, people use the part of the plant directly, usually, as they frequently do with coca.
Natively, they chew it. It
Yeah.
helps them for
Yeah, that was
atmosphere.
supposedly how they lived and worked at those high altitudes.
And walking long
Still, they
distances.
recommend it to tourists because of altitude sickness. The third great scary one, heroin. If one takes the plant from the poppy, or the latex from the poppy flower, this contains 3 different alkaloids, one of which is opium. You take the opium, treat it in a very simple process. One of the things you can separate from it is morphine, and then with a very simple chemical process, morphine can be converted into dimorphine or diacetylmorphine, otherwise known as heroin. Once it's in the body, heroin acts exactly the same as morphine. Another part of the opium latex can be used to produce hydrocodone or oxycodone, which are the active ingredients of Vicodin or Oxycontin. But these are all 3 straightforward plant products.
Great. We have another caller. Hi. Welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yes, when the large drug cartels and the large drug dealers are arrested, doesn't the government usually have the right to seize their property, the big houses, the cars, and usually their cash and bank accounts? And what usually becomes of that when the government seizes their property?
Okay, thank you. Since 1974, United States federal law has allowed the civil forfeiture of any assets that are used in the carrying out of a crime or that are acquired with the proceeds of the crime. So that, yes, the federal government and now the state governments frequently forfeit any money or house or yachts that are associated with drug transactions or drug dealers. And unfortunately, it also includes the $10,000 cash a gardener carried in his pocket when he flew to Texas to buy plants for his nursery business. Typically, if you're driving on the streets of America and you have $1,000 or more in your pocket, you risk having a policeman confiscate it as probably drug money.
Unfortunately today,
What?
Unfortunately today, $1,000 isn't quite as much money as it was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
The cynical way of
Still
defining
quite significant when they take it.
He's saying take a break, not a caller. I'm sorry. We'll take another break, people.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't know where my was going.
It's hard to
I consider marijuana the worst of all narcotics as far as worse. The use of morphine or cocaine under the influence then become beast.
Yo, my name is Sammy C, and as you can see, the feds got me locked up in the penitentiary. I got a murder to my left and a rapist on my right, and all I did was toke on my peace pipe. America has since spent $25 billion locking up people who were trying to chill. They weren't trying to fight, they weren't trying to kill, but since 1937, they have totaled $17 million. Now, I don't need to tell y'all what's wrong with that when I did the same time with them violent cats. Look, I know almost half of y'all smoked a dime, so who knows how many of you could be doing time. And even then, after prison, trying to turn a new page. Well, I got news for you. You're earning minimum wage because the feds won't approve your financial aid. So I don't know how you think you're getting college paid. Maybe you can join the army, get the GI Bill, but better not light up or your battle's uphill. They'll throw your butt out of the service dishonorably. All that fuss because you smoked a little THC. And if your grandma wants to hit for her chronic pain, then in most of America, she's legally to blame. So come on, normal people, join me in this fight. We gotta do something now because this mess ain't right. We gotta take it to D.C., tell Congress there. Stop arresting pot users, spend the money elsewhere. Smoking pot is normal. What?
Well, Clayton, you've got a whole bunch of papers there in front of you. Is there something else that's worth talking about?
Yeah, California just had an appeals court ruling that said the numbers that different counties, cities had for the amount of growing is null and void, that the intention of Proposition 215 did not account for the limitation on the amount of growing.
Of course, that's really a quirk of California's legal system.
Well, the
215 was a voter referendum, which is just almost as high in their system as the state constitution. And what the court said was that when the referendum did not put limits in, then it would be illegal for other government unities to limit the referendum by trying to change it. So
right. And they said that
this is something that would happen only in California and not anywhere else.
And they also said that it would have to go back to a referendum vote in order to change it.
That's right, yes.
This is the thing that why we in this state need a referendum. We need it. It is power that has been taken away from us.
Well, you see, I disagree there firmly. I'm opposed to all kinds of referenda and initiative systems because I think that if you go back to the constitutional scheme put together in the Constitution with the separation of powers, with the idea of popular sovereignty through representative government, one of the intense goals was to avoid direct on-the-street democracy, which too often leads to demagogy and even tyranny. That, yes, the people have the voice, but they do it procedurally through a many-step process. You know, and the scary stories that can come up. If you had a referendum, say, in Iran right now, the popular vote would certainly say you have to be a Shiite Muslim or you die.
But you're talking about federal referendum versus state referenda. And we're talking about specifically state ballot initiatives and state referenda as opposed to federal.
I'm opposed to because the states themselves have the same sort of indirect representational minority protecting.
But when we have representatives or congressmen that I can specifically speak of, that really doesn't represent what the people want, and then we get stuck with
people to
vote it back out.
Box and kick the bastards
to vote
out.
them out and, okay, let's take
Hello,
a call.
speaker, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, my question has already been on the air already, but where does the government get the drugs for prescription drugs? Do they grow the plants like in other countries, or do we have labs here in the States or something?
Okay.
All right, thanks for the call. Yeah, it's mostly synthetics, those that are prescription drugs. I guess any type of opioids are synthetically derived. They're not particularly from the plant.
Yes, they are.
They are from the plant?
Yes,
Opioids are.
Oh, yes, they are.
There are some
There
totally
are some,
synthetic
yeah.
ones. Yeah, like fentanyl, for instance. But I think the answer is, in this country at least, the government does not provide any drugs of any kind.
No.
With the exception of medical marijuana.
Right.
That all of the drugs in this country are manufactured and sold by private companies under governmental regulation as to whether they're safe and effective and all of these other things.
And they have this great enforcement arm, and it's called the DEA, that if anybody else tries to infringe upon their ability to keep making money, the DEA comes right down on them hard.
All right. Hi, welcome to Drug Crime and Politics. Oh.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, can you turn your TV down, please?
Okay. Yes, I have a question about marijuana.
Okay.
Okay, marijuana is a drug and it's illegal. What about the tobacco?
Okay.
Wow. Okay, they selling it at the store. That kills you. And marijuana is illegal, but tobacco kills you, why that can't be illegal? I mean, why is that illegal and it's killing people, cancer?
All right, thanks for the question.
Because the government is making money on the tobacco and alcohol that's being sold.
In the 19 teens and 20s, about a dozen states did outlaw cigarettes, not tobacco, and they couldn't make that prohibition stick either. Now, you're right, it's ridiculous. Tobacco is probably the leading killer today, ultimately, with about 400,000 a year. But prohibition just doesn't work for any drug.
Yeah, we have the study right here. Within just one state, marijuana kills 0, and tobacco, alcohol, everything kills so much more.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Quick follow-up on tobacco. First of all, sniff was a tobacco product, right?
What?
Sniff?
Snuff. Snuff is, yes.
Okay, and do any other countries sell dip or any other variety of that, like maybe other than Australia? I mean, I know France does, but never seen anybody buy it.
Okay.
But more seriously, to go deeper, we have our new ordinance that we just passed a little while ago, and we followed other cities, and other cities are following us. Why didn't we do more on ventilation? I mean, here we have air issues here anyway. I mean, not to mention, the smell of burnt fish and whatnot.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Snuff basically is just ground up powdered tobacco leaves, and it's sold and used all over the world to varying degrees. And as for things like smoking in restaurants, smoking indoors, I'm one of those poor unfortunate addicts affected by these, and I'm forced outside into the cold and rain or the burning sun. But there are very strong, good arguments for protecting shared indoor spaces. Now, I personally would like to see the same ordinance expanded to include perfumes, to which many people are allergic, and to suit my own grouchy old personality, crying babies, but that's a different story altogether.
Well, it looks like we have, a minute left? 2 minutes left?
Well, I just think that this program is about calling people to their calling. And this is a calling here to stop the prohibition and stop the harm that's coming to so many individuals from school age that they can't get money for educations, from old people that are in public housing that are being discriminated against. We all need to get up and start making a few things better for all of us.
And I want to repeat my normal saying that we love to have you call us. Your calls help us make the show. We like your participation. But while it's nice for you to call us, it's vitally crucial for you to call your elected representatives. Tell them what you expect them to do, and more important, if they don't do it, kick them out and replace them with someone else. Thank you. Good night.
Very good.
Present policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to whether marijuana or any other substance has a medical benefit.
The fact that marijuana is a less dangerous drug.
We're going full-blown into a program that has failed and failed every other time we've tried it. Please point out one success in 30 years of an eradication program that has stopped drugs from coming in this country. Point out one success, because I
Jim Myers, Braves Oaks Management District. He's coming back to the stage again. He's been here once, but he's coming back up, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker today. So please give him your undivided attention as he honors someone.
All right, thank you so much. Hey, have you liked the Zydeco music? How about the gospel singing, kids? Unfortunately, the heavens are in